Most people think that Romeo and Juliet is just a made-up story about two kids who fell in love and died because of it. But if you ask any Italian, especially those from Verona, they will tell you otherwise. They believe that their city was once home to two star-crossed lovers whose forbidden romance ended in tragedy. And that's not all. There are plenty of artifacts to back up this claim. So today, let's find out if Romeo and Juliet were actually real and what happened to them. But first, welcome to our channel, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest stories from human history. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as some of this video may be offensive or disturbing. The makers of this video in no way support or condone the actions of the subjects featured. In the play Romeo and Juliet, we meet two young sweethearts from rival Italian families who fall madly in love at first sight. But unfortunately, due to a series of unfortunate events, both end up dead. As soon as the play premiered in the 16th century, it became an instant success. But this was only the beginning of its story. Today, Romeo and Juliet is considered to be one of the greatest love stories ever written. It has been adapted into countless films, ballets, and operas. And the names Romeo and Juliet have become synonymous with young, passionate love. Every year, thousands of tourists visit Verona, Italy, hoping to catch a glimpse of the places that inspired Shakespeare to write his timeless tragedy. But if you ask the locals, they'll tell you that the house where Romeo supposedly courted Juliet wasn't just a figment of Shakespeare's imagination. Rather, it was the actual house where two star-crossed lovers lived and breathed. So how did Shakespeare come up with the story? Well, he probably got it from an old French author named Pierre de Rongzer, who wrote a poem about two lovers from Verona named Romulus and Juliet in 1325. However, scholars believe that the story goes much further back, all the way to ancient Rome. According to legend, Rome was once home to two powerful and feuding noble families, the Montagues and the Capulets. Their hatred for each other was so intense that it spilled out onto the streets, turning Rome into a battleground. In the middle of all this chaos, two young men found solace in each other's company. One was named Romulus, son of the head of the Montague family, and the other was named Juliet, son of the head of the Capulet family. Despite their families' differences, Romulus and Juliet fell deeply in love and decided to get married in secret. However, their happiness was short-lived. At a party hosted by the Capulets, Romulus got into a fight with Juliet's cousin Tybalt and killed him. Because of this, Romulus was banished from Rome, and Juliet's father, furious with his daughter for marrying a Montague, forced her to marry a man from a different family entirely. Desperate to escape this fate, Juliet went to Friar Lawrence for help. He gave her a potion that would put her into a death-like slumber for 42 hours. Then he sent a letter to Romulus explaining the plan and told him to pick her up when she seemed lifeless. Unfortunately, the letter never reached Romulus, and he assumed that Juliet was truly dead. Heartbroken, he returned to Rome and took his own life beside her. When Juliet woke up and realized what had happened, she was devastated. She took her own life shortly after. The families were ultimately consumed by grief and remorse, realizing the devastating consequences of their feud. Now, while this story may sound familiar, it wasn't until William Shakespeare came along that the tale of Romulus and Juliet became widely known. In fact, the bard was the first person to use the names Romeo and Juliet instead of Romulus and Juliet. But despite the name change, the story remained largely the same. This is why many believe that Shakespeare simply borrowed the names of these lovers from the original story, but changed the characters to fit his own narrative. So were Romeo and Juliet really real? If you ask historians, they will say probably not. There is no solid evidence to suggest that Romeo and Juliet were based on real people. Rather, it's more likely that Shakespeare created the characters based on the existing folklore and ballad about the two lovers from Verona. But here's where things get interesting. While there is no evidence of Shakespeare's lovers in the historical records, there are a few artifacts that suggest that there may have once been a couple from Verona who met a tragic end. The story goes that a wealthy silk merchant named Antonio Capelletti had a daughter named Juliet, who was considered the most beautiful girl in town. Fortunately, he didn't have a son, so he began searching for a suitable match for Juliet. Meanwhile, another rich merchant named Vincenzo Montecchi had a son named Romeo, who was known throughout Verona for his good looks and charm. As fate would have it, Romeo and Juliet met at a party hosted by one of Juliet's many suitors. And from the moment they saw each other across the room, they knew they were in love. They began dating in secret, but their relationship was doomed from the start since their fathers despised each other. When the Capuletti family found out about the relationship, they were furious. They arranged for Romeo to be banished from Verona and forbade Juliet from ever seeing him again. But the lovers were determined to be together no matter the cost. With the help of Friar Lawrence, they planned to elope and start a new life together in a different city. On the day of their wedding, Romeo snuck into Juliet's room, and the two exchanged vows in secret. But their happiness was short-lived. When Romeo left the room, Juliet's nurse discovered that she had taken a sleeping potion that would make her seem dead for 42 hours. Thinking that Juliet was truly dead, the nurse went to Friar Lawrence for help. He then sent a letter to Romeo explaining the situation and telling him to return to Verona as soon as possible. But as fate would have it, the letter never reached Romeo. Instead, he heard rumors that Juliet was dead, and believing these rumors to be true, he returned to Verona to see her for one last time. Upon arriving at the Capuletti house, he drank poison and died beside Juliet's lifeless body. When she awoke and realized what had happened, Juliet took her own life. This is where the story takes a bizarre twist. The next morning, when the townspeople arrived at the Capuletti house to find the bodies of Romeo and Juliet, they were so overcome with grief that they immediately ended the feud between the two families. And as a symbol of their newfound unity, they built a monument over the lovers' tomb. Today, visitors can still see the monument in Verona's oldest cemetery, which is said to be the final resting place of Romeo and Juliet. But that's not all. There are other pieces of evidence that suggest the story may be true. For example, there is a painting from 1837 that depicts the moment when Romeo and Juliet first lay eyes on each other at a party. The painting is called Juliet at the Capulet Ball, and it shows a young woman standing in a balcony with a man staring at her from below. Many believe that the woman in the painting is none other than Juliet herself. But perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence is a pair of 19th century letters that are said to be from the lovers themselves. In the letters, Romeo and Juliet exchange vows of undying love and devotion, promising to be together forever. Of course, skeptics argue that these letters are nothing but clever forgeries made to capitalize on the legend of Romeo and Juliet. But one thing is for sure. Whether or not Romeo and Juliet were based on real people, their story continues to capture the hearts and minds of people all over the world. In Verona alone, over 6 million tourists visit every year to see the sites where the story is said to have taken place. And that's not surprising considering that the tale of Romeo and Juliet is one of the most romantic and tragic love stories ever told. But now we want to hear from you. Do you believe that Romeo and Juliet were real? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching.